Hello everybody, welcome back. This is the third video in a 5 video series about making a report in Power BI. And so we're going to continue here in producing our Power BI report. We're doing this in the online app at app.powerbi.com. We are accessing this through the GWU app page. If your organization has this app, or if you have access to this app, you can do it this way. Otherwise, you can do everything that we're doing here on the desktop version of Power BI. The reason that we're using the app is that a lot of students don't have access to the desktop version because they are Mac users. So we're going to go ahead and make a line chart next. But before we do that, just to remind everybody, these are the data that we're working with that were wrangled from a previous video. So if you want to work with these data, I have a link to that video in the comment section below, in the description below, and you can go ahead and wrangle those data from the part that's relevant here is the part from the World Bank database. We're working with female labor force participation rates and GDP per capita for all of the countries that the World Bank has data for. In some cases doesn't have data for, so notice that there is some missing data, but that's not a problem for our purposes. So we're going to go ahead now and add to our report by incorporating a line chart. So just go ahead and right here is the icon for a line chart. Just click on that and that produces a line chart down here in the corner. Okay, so that's very nice. And now all we have to do is, again, go back to the data here. And we want to make a line chart of female labor force participation rates. So that's going to be on the y-axis. So we drag that into the y-axis field. Okay, and then this is going to be over time. So remember, going back to our data that we're working with here, this is coming from the spreadsheet that we imported, but if we just go ahead and look at the data, we can see that there's a time dimension, a temporal dimension to these data, that these go from 1997 to 2021, and that's what we're going to try to visualize now. Okay, and so what we're going to do is we're going to take the year here and we're going to put that in the x-axis. And there we go. And notice here on the y-axis now we have the sum of female labor force participation rates, and that doesn't really make any sense. We want to have an average rather than a sum. So really this is taking the average for each country for each year, which isn't really an average. It's really just the observation. Okay, so we're selecting average there, but there's no option here really just to have the just show the value as the value. So we're going to just go ahead here and have the and select average, and that gives us what we want. Now what it's showing us is an unweighted average here of female labor force participation, but when we interact with other aspects of the report and we start clicking on individual countries, later on we're going to have a map up here where we can select on individual countries. I'm going to have a scatter plot down here. But even now we can select on particular countries from our histogram, and Power BI is going to recognize, should recognize what we're selecting on. So now this is the weighted world average, and we can see that female labor force participation rates have been declining over time. So that's a really cool thing about Power BI, is that it does recognize, from our data, how the countries, based on country names or other attributes in the data, it can make connections between different aspects of the database, and it knows, and then it makes the different visualizations interactive with each other. So when we click on a particular country in one part of the report, it shows us the data for that country in the other part of the report, right? So what we're going to see when we click on individual countries is a line chart for the individual country over time, which is really kind of a cool feature. So we can go ahead and click on Brazil, and we'll see the line chart for female labor force participation for Brazil, Russia, China, what have you. and India has been on the decline. So we were seeing the unweighted average, we were seeing an increase, but we noticed that two of the biggest countries in the world, India and China, in terms of population, have been seeing declining female labor force participation, and this is therefore defining a declining trend in the global weighted average, right? So anyway, that's a little bit of what's going on with the data there. So from here we can just kind of go ahead and we can format the visual, and we can, the x-axis is labeled appropriately as year. Let's go ahead and click on the y-axis here and the title, and instead of using auto title, we'll put female labor force participation %. Okay, that'll change that. And then let's change the title of the overall chart and click on that. You can do that by clicking on the General tab over here, click on Title here, and then we can call this just something like Trends in Female Labor Force Participation. All right. And that's it. We're done with our line chart. In the next part of this series, we'll add a little map over here, a choropleth map, and we'll shade it and make it interactive with both the column chart and the line chart.